Hello and welcome to the LLG Grapevine podcast. You're listening to Helen McGrath, Head of Public Affairs, and Dennis Hall, LLG Bulletin Editor.
Hello, everyone.
In a week where political impartiality is under scrutiny, let's take a look, in a balanced way, at the previous week's events. Dennis.
Well, we should begin by reminding ourselves that the local government sector is both innovative and forward-thinking. Listen to this story about Liverpool and its approach to live events that hit the national news last week. The Eurovision host city of Liverpool has become the first city in the United Kingdom to commit to the Paris Agreement on climate change for major live events. The city will now issue licenses only for those concerts and festivals that agree to help reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 50% to help meet climate goals, including using a proportion of renewable energy to power the festival and reducing the number of cars visitors take to events. The council has taken the step after recent research released found that car travel to festivals made up a significant proportion of an event's climate emissions, but was not normally included in the festival's carbon footprint. All major festivals and events must get licenses to operate from local authorities, and while 310 local authorities in the UK have officially declared a climate emergency, representing more than 75% of all local authorities of this type, Liverpool is the first to commit to these measures. The Paris Agreement was signed in 2015 by 196 countries to keep global temperature rises below 1.5 degrees centigrade by the end of the century. The study on which these changes are based found that festivals could reduce their emissions significantly by reducing parking spaces. Researchers have estimated the negative impact of audiences travelling to 8 large festivals in the UK, including Glastonbury, Reading and Leeds. The estimated Bestival had the largest carbon output per ticket holder. They also calculated that festivals may be able to halve their overall carbon emissions by reducing car parking by 70% and providing more options for travel, such as train, coach, or active travel, such as cycling. The Liverpool research found a double failure of regulation and innovation when it comes to large live music events, but that there was huge potential for reducing emissions by incrementally reducing the number of private vehicles audiences used to get to the venue. The new licenses will begin next year and will call for progressively greener measures for events held over the next 5 years. Well done, Liverpool.
Well done indeed. Survivors and the bereaved families of major disasters like Hillsborough, the Manchester Arena bombing, and the Grenfell Tower fire will receive new dedicated support in the future under plans unveiled by the government. An expert panel will act to represent families as a new independent public advocate, ensuring that the voices of victims and their families are better heard, right from the immediate aftermath of a tragedy until all inquiries and inquests have concluded. The independent public advocate will bring together a specialist panel of people appointed on their relevant expertise and on their experience of working with public authorities. This includes former social workers, ex-civil servants, retired doctors, emergency services, professionals with media experience, and community leaders. The trained advocates will provide practical support to families, the bereaved, and those who have suffered life-changing injuries, including signposting them to vital financial, physical, and mental health services such as victim support, the homicide service, and any charities established as a result of a major disaster. Providing them with regular updates about the investigation, including helping them receive information at inquests or inquiries. Making sure they understand processes and their rights so they can fully participate in the investigation where there is a right for them to do so. And advocating on their behalf to public authorities and government, providing a direct channel to voice concerns around the responsiveness of organisations such as the police or local councils. Crucially, the independent public advocate will be responsible for producing a report once all investigations have been completed and make recommendations to the government for improvements based on the experiences of survivors and the bereaved. Now, turning back to the theme of impartiality, what can you tell us about the judiciary, Dennis?
Diversity issues and the judiciary are nowadays rarely out of the news, but usually for all of the wrong reasons. Here's more on this. It has been reported in the Law Society Gazette that a judge has been issued with what is termed formal advice after asking an ethnic minority litigant who was born in the UK whether she had researched the law in the country in which you are living. A statement recently published by the Judicial Conduct Investigations Office states that the Lord Chief Justice, with the Lord Chancellor's agreement, issued Her Honour Judge Tracy Cronin with formal advice for misconduct. According to the statement, Cronin asked an ethnic minority litigant who was born in the UK whether she had researched the law in the country in which you are living. During the investigation of a complaint by the litigant, Cronin acknowledged her question offended the complainant and apologised. A nominated judge concluded that by asking such a question, Judge Cronin had displayed an element of subconscious bias, appearing to imply that the complainant had not been born in the UK. The nominated judge made a finding of misconduct and recommended that Judge Cronin receive a sanction of formal advice. The Lord Chief Justice and Lord Chancellor agreed, the statement continues. In reaching their decision, the Lord Chief Justice and Lord Chancellor concluded that the judge's question had unintentionally breached the expectations set out in the Guide to Judicial Conduct that judges should ensure nobody in court is exposed to displays of bias or prejudice. And they also took into account that the judge accepted responsibility for her actions and apologised. Now, this case sheds some light upon the nature of the sanctions regime that governs judges' misbehaviour. But sadly, it also opens our eyes to what I believe is an attitude of mind that helps explain why ethnic diversity has made so little progress in the court system, and in the judiciary in particular. The Constitutional Reform Act 2005 sets out sanctions for misconduct by judicial office holders. They are, in order of severity, formal advice, formal warning, reprimand, and removal from office.
Now, taken from the LGA Bulletin, there are thought to be more than 165,000 vacancies in adult social care in England. That's an increase of 52% in a year, raising questions about how to attract people to the industry. With greater demand for support in the community and not enough people wanting to work as carers, the spotlight is being shone on low rates of pay and the clear difficulties in retaining staff. Councillor David Fothergill, chairman of the LGA's Community Wellbeing Board, said, "Councils across the country are working with local care providers to understand their pressures and identify ways to best support through the council tax precept and other funding. We have consistently said that 13 billion is needed for social care so that its many pressures can be addressed and councils can deliver on all of their statutory duties." Now, this comes at a time where a survey by the Local Government Information Unit has found more than half of councils in England plan to cut more services while also raising council tax by the maximum possible amount. 9 out of 10 councils are increasing council tax from April, but this alone will not balance their budgets, meaning most are also proposing to cut spending, increase fees for services such as parking and waste, spend their rainy day financial reserves, and sell off assets such as land and buildings. Dennis, it's not looking good for infrastructure funding either, is it?
I don't think it is. County councils have raised serious concerns for infrastructure funding under plans to replace Section 106 monies that are paid by developers. Here's the story. The County Councils Network, CCN, has cautioned that government plans to replace Section 106 contributions with a new infrastructure levy risks reducing the amount of funding available for roads, schools and medical centres. The warning comes in a new report published by CCN that sets out a number of concerns about the developer contributions system, including a fear that the proposed reform will be a jack of all trades that will leave little money for infrastructure. Under the current system, Section 106 contributions from developers provide funding for affordable housing as well as site-specific infrastructure, while the Community Infrastructure Levy also raises funds for large-scale infrastructure. Plans to replace the current approach have been set out in the Levelling Up and Regeneration White Paper and will involve the introduction of a new infrastructure levy, which will be spent on a wider array of things, including affordable housing and local council services. But the report warned that this may see spending on infrastructure improvements actually reduce. It also noted that presently 2/3 of developer contributions are spent on affordable housing, with less than a quarter going to roads, schools, transport, community spaces, and medical centres. The CCN warned that the government must ensure that there is sufficient funding left over in the new system to build infrastructure to support new homes, and that the proposed reforms risk simply replacing one broken system with another. The report recommended the new system should have a greater focus on capturing funds for infrastructure, such as roads and public services. It also argued that the clauses of the bill which permit the levy to be used for purposes other than infrastructure or affordable housing should be removed, as this could divert funding, which is already inadequate, to other services. The Levelling Up and Regeneration Bill has passed its second reading in the House of Lords and is currently at the committee stage.
And finally from me, a rare sitting of the election court has agreed to withdraw a petition for a council election to be declared void after receiving conclusive evidence that the petitioner handed packets of dates to potential voters. This is the case of Mohammed Afzal and Ayub Khan, in which the judge highlighted that it was relevant to point out that the election took place during Ramadan and that the consumption of dates is a traditional way in which Muslims end their fast at sundown. On the facts, however, there was extensive evidence that dates were given to electors with Labour Party stickers on them, and that this was a widespread practice throughout the ward during the election campaign. Rule 12 of the Election Petition Rules 1960 stipulates various requirements upon an application for permission to withdraw a petition. Here, the old case of County of Durham, Glaholm and Storr and Elliott was relevant, in which it was held that the withdrawing of an election petition must be by leave of the judge, and if the judge saw that the withdrawal was the result of any compromise, of any giving and taking so as to prevent evidence being brought forward, which ought to be brought forward, not in the interest of either of the parties, but in the interest of the constituency and of purity of election, the judge ought not to allow a petition to be withdrawn. He ought, as far as he would have power to do so, insist upon the petition being proceeded with. Notwithstanding the above dicta, the judge allowed the petition to be withdrawn because of the procedural difficulties for it to continue by virtue of the adversarial process in which a judge could not partake. However, that concern is overcome by Section 140 of RPA, which makes it clear that the nature of an election court is now inquisitorial. And on that note, you can read more on the items discussed today, and many more besides, by going to Bulletin number 9, available on the LLG website now. So it's goodbye from me.
And the same from me too.